Lisa mentioned I'm going to talk a little more from the political side. I really don't have a lot on slides, but I will give you just a quick update about what we've been doing in Washington, D.C. from NPPC's point of view. We've been lobbying very hard for increases in appropriations for 2015 and beyond. And what we've asked for was $30 million, 15 of that to go to USDA's Agricultural Research Service, $10 million to go to the National Animal Health Laboratory Network, and $5 million to go to APHIS to improve comprehensive surveillance. In the House of Representatives bill, we got $4.5 million, with only $1 million of that actually dedicated to go to the ARS. And we got $2.1 million in the Senate, which was all going to go toward reporting and surveillance. And so we still have work when they go to the conference committee to try to at least get it back up to the 4.5 and try to transfer more of that into going toward research. The other thing that you'll hear a little bit, you heard a little bit if you were at the SIP meeting yesterday or the PED summit about a USDA's plan, but one of the things we have been talking about with USDA consistently, basically since day one, are these points I'll read to you. One is that we need USDA to collaborate with the industry to fund, prioritize, coordinate, and conduct research. We need USDA to coordinate with FDA, Department of Homeland Security, and the industry to enhance the biosecurity of feed and feed ingredients. We need USDA to conduct in-depth investigations to discover the pathway of PED virus entry into the United States. We've also asked USDA to collaborate with industry and the non-laboratories to ensure seamless and efficient inter-laboratory communications and data sharing. We've asked USDA to provide funding for diagnostic testing and viral genetic sequencing so we can be better able to gather information needed to control PED, and also to provide funding to enhance biosecurity. We've also asked, when it comes to reporting, that reporting be done in collaboration with the state animal health officials, and that reporting be used for information only, not to have regulatory consequences behind it, and that the data they collect be kept in a secure manner. So those are the things NPPC has been asking in Washington, D.C., and as we've worked with USDA. So what I'm going to share next is a little bit of background on where we think we're going to go next and what are we going to do about the next disease, because we'd like PED, but it's the last disease that enters the U.S., but I don't think we're going to be that lucky. So this is basically a little background that says what we've learned from PED is that we weren't ready. We weren't ready to address a non-reportable OIE disease. If PED had been foot and mouth disease virus, we've got a plan. We've worked on that plan. We have tabletop exercises at that plan. And it may or may not include depopulation of animals like they did in the United Kingdom, but we would have had a plan. Because we didn't have a plan, NPPC back in March at our pork forum put together a resolution, and you all know how to read, so I'm not necessarily going to read this to you, but basically we said we need to develop a plan of coordination looking at how we would handle the next economically significant swine disease that enters the United States that's not on OIE's foreign animal disease list. And so that plan needed to include a prioritized listing by the threat of economically significant non-reportable swine diseases that aren't currently in the United States. We needed to lay out what are the responsibilities of federal, state, local governments, what are the responsibilities of our industry organizations, whether it's AASV, Pork Board, or NPPC, or our state and local or county pork producer associations. We also needed to say, what are producers' responsibilities? So what happens when you're on the farm and you see something? What is your responsibility, and what are the responsibilities of whether it's allied industries or our veterinarians on the farm in surveillance and response? And then how do you coordinate the strategy, have a coordinated strategy of all of those governmental and industry organizations to respond and contain a disease? And then if something happens like we've done with PET, where we know that we haven't contained it, how do we go ahead and try to manage a disease? Because I think there's the initial response, you try to contain, you try to control, but then how do you manage to look at success in the long term? We also need to say what are the strategies we need to share information. We've heard that information may exist, but it's not open to this government entity or to that researcher, and so how do we effectively gather data and then share that data? And then we needed to look at strategies to increase the defense of our borders. How do we keep the next disease out? And Harry mentioned that as well. And then we can build a Cadillac, but what's it going to cost? Or maybe we need to build a Escalade instead of a Chevy Volt. So anyway, we're supposed to try to get these plans put together and a report on where we are anyway back to the 2015 Pork Forum delegate body. We've got a lot of work to do. One of the plans to hope we will do is that as we put this plan together, it will be ready by fall to go to the United States Animal Health Association so that the state animal health officials will have a chance to throw darts at it and see where it needs to be improved. That was on the NPPC side for forum. Pork Checkoff has what they call advisements, which is an advice or plan that what the staff and the pork board should be doing. So their advisement read that they need to look at plans, developing a plan for funding and building infrastructure needed to collect and manage swine health surveillance data. And there are three options that they were going to look at. One would be an industry-driven and directed program that's housed within the pork board. The second might be an industry-funded third-party entity housed independently of the pork board. Or the third option would be a state-federal industry program that's cooperatively funded and managed, not dissimilar to what happens in the poultry industry. So where we're at, we're not taking many summer vacations. We're going to be working hard trying to get this plan ready to go. The swine veterinarians are taking the lead on developing a prioritized list of the known swine viruses. And they're trying to index those based on economic significance. So if we get this into the United States, how bad is it going to be? Do we have the diagnostic capabilities to identify it? Do we have the diagnostic capabilities to help us control it and know where we are in status of our herds? Do we have control strategies? Are there effective vaccines? Those are some of the priorities we're going to be looking at. We also can't prioritize what we don't know. So we need to understand that there's probably emerging diseases that are unknown. So as we look at a plan, do we need to have a plan that says this type of disease that may be a respiratory disease spread in this manner that may be zoonotic is approached in this manner versus a disease that spreads fecal-oral that's not zoonotic may need different control strategies. And so it's hard to plan for what you don't know, but you can at least put some categories together. We have a response plan advisory group, and that plan includes producers from various parts of the United States. So we made sure we have the Southeast, that we have the Panhandle, that we have the Midwest well represented. We also have practicing veterinarians as well as production company veterinarians on the group. We have the state animal health officials from a couple different states involved that can bring that information back to the state veterinarians. And we have USDA emergency services on there. We met last month to go over our first draft of the plan. I think we got to about page 3 of 16 in an all-day meeting. Had a lot of discussion over what we learned from PED that could be applied, what we could have done different. And like I said, we got to about page 3, but we had a lot of philosophical discussion that's going to guide our changes in the plan. We definitely considered the authorities that are necessary to control disease. Does USDA have the authorities in place? Do the state animal health officials have the authorities in place? and what are the responsibilities for response? Where do those lie? And so we've got the modifications underway. We're ready to go out to the group to further have them take shots at it. One of the things we're looking at the plan, if you look at a foot and mouth disease response, you have different phases. So it might be heightened response or heightened alert because, Canada or Mexico's got something that, we don't, or they have FMD. And then you have to look at from confirmation to surveillance to recovery. Those are all the different phases. You're either in the middle of an outbreak, you're identifying an outbreak, you're in the middle of an outbreak, or you're trying to recover from an outbreak so that you can be declared free. And so we looked at, we need to make sure we have those same phases in an emerging disease outbreak or response plan, because right now we're in the middle of an outbreak of PED, but at what point do we say we're in recovery, we're getting better, we're controlling it, and then at what point do we say we may be free of it? And unless you define that, you don't really have your goals lined up. The other thing that you can look at in an emerging disease, and this was taken from Jim Ross' FMD paper, is you have different types of outbreaks. If that herd in Indiana, that was the first herd we knew about, had been totally contained and it was only that Indiana herd, you may have been able to go in and depopulate, call it a focal outbreak, keep it contained, and you treat it in one way. But if we look at, really by May 17th, we were probably in type 4, where we had multiple states, it was widespread, it was national, we had 70 herds that we didn't, or 31 herds in several states. It was probably either a type 3 or type 4. You may have different response to that. So that's where we are. I don't have a lot of big news for you other than we're working on this. We're using this thought process to look at how we would respond. Pork Board is working, and I know that their board met on Tuesday to look at how you would collect surveillance data and be able to utilize that for disease control. And the big thing that we need to look at with surveillance data is how do you balance the importance of producer confidentiality with the industry needs to be able to have a good enough picture to manage disease and protect the entire U.S. swine herd. And so that's a balance that's going to really need to be looked at. And as I mentioned, we're supporting appropriations in Congress to support comprehensive surveillance within USDA. And if you look at, I loved this was left over from bird flu, but we've got a lot of border restrictions in. We look at TSA, and we've got our orange, yellow, red. We've got a lot of things going on, but how do we keep that little pathogen from getting through our secure borders? So, as I mentioned, we're really urging USDA to work with FDA and DHS to continue to investigate how coronaviruses got into the United States. Using a model of FMD or a model of classical swine fever may not ever help us get to the pathway that a coronavirus entered. And so we need to do some really specific risk analysis around that. We've also, from pork producers, have a call for proposals out to analyze what are the existing safeguards in place. We're going to look at an index of products that we're bringing into the United States to say, can we analyze, can we determine what of those are risky, and do we need to consider additional safeguards at the border? And I shouldn't say at the border, it could be additional safeguards at whatever foreign country these items are produced, and perhaps that's the most logical place, is put safeguards in place, whether it's in China, whether it's wherever else we get products, and then our borders are strengthened in that way. So in summary, I would say your industry organizations are working hard. We're collaborating with USDA and others to look at controlling not only PED, but protecting against future emerging diseases, and so that we can appropriately respond to outbreaks And that's going to require a coordinated industry, state, and federal effort. And that may be, if it's the next one is a zoonotic disease, that may be with federal partners we haven't worked with a lot. It may be with CDC, and definitely we can consider where Department of Homeland Security fits in. So with that, we've got time for a question or two, and then we've got, I hate to run out, but we do have a time-sensitive meeting.
Last week, Russia put a ban on all importing of pigs from North America.
Yep.
What are you or Canadian or U.S. governments doing to work on lifting those bans?
Sure. We do have USDA's import-export working closely with the industry, trying to identify what risks exist. Live pigs obviously should be able to put together a program of quarantine and testing to show that certain animals are negative. EU, they've worked with them to say, how do you import things like plasma products that we know are safe coming out of the process but may have some post-processing contamination. So, they put in place a restriction on post-processing hold to assure additional virus kill. So the big thing we're trying to do is balance science with politics, and a lot of those bans are political and not scientific. And as we continue to try to, work that, it's going to require political pressure from our government as well as scientific information.